Hey you guys, so this is a masterclass that I did. I'm sharing the teaching part here on YouTube. I also did an Akashic activation at the end of this. I don't feel like that's really appropriate to share on YouTube. So what I've done is I've separated the two parts of the clip so you can watch teaching here on YouTube. If you want to do the Akashic activation as well, highly recommend. You can go to my website. I'll have the link in the comments below. And you can go, you just give me your email and then I send it to you. And you can watch the file there. But that will be the full experience of the class. Otherwise, you can just watch the teaching here if you'd like to do that as well. So I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think. Okay, second caveat before the class starts. So I'm editing it and I realized that the way that Zoom recorded it, you can see a lot of the participants, and I don't want to have them on YouTube because that wasn't a part of the class. I feel like that's a violation of privacy. So I cropped them out of the video so you can see the presentation, but you can't see me up in the top right corner like you usually can. So I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention. I had hoped that you would be able to see me, but really what I'm sharing is in the PowerPoint anyway. So, okay, without further ado, enjoy. So welcome to the Womb of Creation class. Like I was saying, the energy for this is so big. So what we're going to be doing today specifically, first, we're going to be doing a teaching. I imagine that this is going to last around 90 minutes. For my note takers, I love taking notes. I am totally the person who's jotting down a million things. I'm going to be going through these slides pretty quickly. So what I would recommend is really just like, this isn't so much about you getting the information down. This is really more so about feeling. So what I would recommend is writing something down if you feel like, oh, like this is something I want to remember. But don't worry so much about like writing down what's on the slides, because number one, I'm going to go through them so quickly, I don't think you'll be able to keep up. And number two, I really want you to feel all of this information. This isn't so much mental, it's really more of like what's going on in the body as you're receiving this. Because also a lot of this is things that are going to activate remembrance for you more so than a mental understanding. So welcome to the class. Here's me. I'm Allie Wilkins. So for some of you guys, especially who are going to be watching the play, for some of you guys, I'm totally new to you. So I just want to take a moment and introduce myself. And I'm going to go ahead and lock the room in just a couple minutes. Hold on, please. Okay. So like I said, I'm Allie Wilkins. As all of us, I've evolved a lot over the last several years. But really my work is supporting people in finding their, like really seeing their soul blueprint and utilizing that to support you in all aspects of your life and the work that you're doing and your purpose and your mission and your love and your relationships and your whole quality of life. So that spans out into like a zillion different things, and I'm always evolving as you are. So right now it looks like doing Akashic record work with people, doing mentorships, individual and group mentorships, courses, books. Right now I have one book, shameless self-plug back here, but I plan to have many. So if you want to learn more about me, you guys are probably connected with me on Instagram. You can find me there, but you can also go to my website, alliewilkins.com, and just see what's going on with me whenever you watch this. So that's me. And my intention really for this space together today is to reframe your understanding of the underworld. And if anything I say doesn't resonate for you or doesn't, I just want to make sure I'm recording real quick. Do you guys see a record? Did you get a recording thing? Okay, cool. That's happened before where I've done the whole class and it wasn't recording. Okay, so my intention today really for this space, like I said, is to reorient you to the underworld and the lower world and what it actually is, because we've had a lot of distortion around this space, and I want to just bring back the remembrance of the primordial power of this space. So what I was saying, if anything I say doesn't resonate with you, just like throw it away. This isn't about you aligning with exactly how I see things. It's about you feeling into what's presented in this class and taking whatever is a gem for you and just leaving everything else out, because that's really the goal here. So like I said, what we're going to be doing is starting with a teaching. So I imagine I'm going to be going through this PowerPoint probably for an hour. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm going to look at them afterwards so I can get through everything, because there's quite a bit. And if you know me, you know that I really like to get into the nitty gritty of a lot of things. I'm a projector in human design, so I don't do like surface. I'm like, no, we're going to go all the way in. So there's a lot here today. But I will take questions at the end of it. And then the last probably half hour of the class, we're going to be doing an Akashic Records attunement. And so my guides will give me part of the Akashic attunement that we receive, like in any sort of class I do. They never give me the whole thing, but what has come in is like so potent. I can't wait for you guys to experience it. And I can't wait to watch the replay so I can do it, because it's just really, really beautiful. This morning I was like taking bullet points, like crying. It's not a big deal. So if you would like, you could grab some tissues because you'll probably cry, but it'll be a good cry. That transformative cry, right? So that's kind of our schedule for today. So before we start, I want to just open us up with an intentional prayer, mostly to center and ground myself, but also to open the space, because this is truly a ceremony. We're doing this for ourselves, but also as all of us gather. There's about 50 of you who have signed up for the replay of this. Not everybody is here live, but if you think about 50 people attuning to this energy and how that ripples out as it touches everyone or a lot of people in our own space, this is a big thing. This is a big deal. So we're going to set the proper ceremonial space. So just go ahead and close your eyes. Just get comfy. And just start to take a couple big deep breaths in and out. And just bring all of your attention, all of your awareness, all of your energy into your body itself. And if you'd like, you can snap your fingers over different parts of your chakra body, over your energetic line, to call your energy back to these spaces. Just bringing all of your attention into the body, feeling your inhales as they come in. If you have any excess energy like me, you can just shake your hands, stomp your feet, just removing any excess energy that's not going to be helpful during this space together. If there's any intrusive thoughts coming in, just imagine them coming in on a cloud and moving out of your peripheral vision. Giving yourself the gift of this space truly just being for you. Empty space with no distractions, where you can just fully receive whatever is here for you. And so I'm just going to say a prayer to my guides and to the guides who asked this class to be created. I'm just asking you to open us up into this sacred space together. Hold please. I'm going to get my headphones because they're doing lawn mowing. Just stay in your breath. So deeply attuning to the breath, what's going on in your body in this exact moment, where there might be aspects of you that are still outside of yourself somewhere. And just calling upon each of our individual guides, our guides and guardians for this specific time together, for this class itself. The ancient feminine, asking that everything that is shared today is coming through the divine, it's coming through something higher than all of us, supporting us as we integrate all aspects of ourself, and bringing the wholeness of our power from each of the different realms into existence. And just bringing your hand to your heart, maybe the other hand to your belly or anywhere else that feels right to you. Just taking 3 big, deep breaths in and out. You guys are all muted, so if you would like to make any sort of audible sound, please do. Anything you are ready to let go of. And finally, just asking that anything that needs to be spoken today is shared through me or shared through anyone here live in this class together today, or in the chat, through questions, through shares, and that everyone receives exactly what it is that they have asked for from this space. And as you slowly start to come back, just maybe moving your hand over your heart a little bit, slowly fluttering your eyes open. And I would love to hear if anyone has any specific intentions for this space, if you want to just write them in the chat. And we can just first actually set this ceremonial space with your intentions. So like I said, my intention for this space is to redefine the underworld and the lower world and really bring back what I would call the ancient truth of this space, so that we can orient to it in a different way and be the way showers, showing the rest of the world and the rest of our communities and the rest of the people around us how we do this, not necessarily through teaching, but just through our way of being, our embodiment, how we hold ourselves. So if anyone would like to share your intention in the chat, I can go ahead and read those. Okay. My intention for being here is to be in sacred remembrance together with other women. Beautiful, Elizabeth. Happy to see you here. And this is also such a huge aspect of this, being together as women in this sacred container. Releasing fear and conditioning of darkness. Oh, that's so good. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Goldie. That's definitely something that we're going to be moving through today. That's really, really big. Thank you for naming that. Would anybody else like to share? I see some typing, I think. To learn. There's going to be a lot of learning going on too. Okay, so if you want to keep adding them, please do. We'll go ahead and get started. Oh, wait, here's some good ones. To let go of fear, doubts, and anything no longer serving me in the collective, and to move into this next level. Beautiful, Ashley. Today, I deepen the knowing of who I am and my connection to more frequent sacred rituals, releasing the shadows from this eclipse and healing these deep old wounds. Beautiful, Jen. My intention is to be open to miracles and bringing balance back to my being. That one feels so connected to the 1111 portal too, specifically, Andrea. Thank you guys for sharing these. So these are all in the space. And please use the chat throughout our session together if there's anything that you want to add, if there's anything that you want to share, because I'm probably going to be keeping my attention on the PowerPoint and the teaching just for now, because otherwise I'll get quite distracted. But other people will see it, and we can also touch on that as we come into the question part at the end. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. So The queendom covers all realms. Most of us are, I mean, we all live in the middle world. This is where we're physically existing, like our physical human bodies. We're familiar with the upper world. This is where, you know, we have experiences with our guides. We have experiences of like animal totems coming in or signs. Like Ashley sent me a text today that had a picture of Allie on a license plate in front of her this morning. Like, see, you're meant to be here. We get these signs, or we get these beautiful forms of intuition that come from the upper world in like a spiritual sense and in the sense of our intuition. This also happens from the lower world too, though. We're just not as, it feels a bit different. And so what I feel as society we're sort of existing in is mostly in the upper world and middle worlds. And as we get more of a taste of the upper world, we're like, oh, I love this. It's less dense. And there's like all this wisdom coming in and guidance and inspiration. I love this. I want more of it. And so we can start to become ungrounded. The lower world is a space that so many of us just avoid, or like as little time as possible here, please. And this is what we're going to be redefining today. But also, we have to spend more time in the lower world so that we can fully balance ourselves. I think as Andrea mentioned in her intention, like bringing more balance to ourselves, because if we want to expand our intuitive gifts, our just spiritual experience in general, we have to expand the depth that we're willing to go to. They're going to be equal. So if you're only willing to go to the surface of the shadow, you're only going to be able to experience a certain amount in that higher dimensional realm. I actually don't want to say higher dimensional, because the lower realm, I would say, is also quite high vibrational. It's just different. It's just a different feeling. So this tree is, I was like, I have to use this picture because this tree, we're going to be working with the imagery of a tree, which you guys are all familiar with, I would imagine. Trees go up towards the sky and branch out, right? And in this picture, you can see this tree is huge. So for those of you in my initiation mastermind, the group mastermind, we're going on a retreat in a couple weeks. And this picture is actually from Oak Alley Plantation, where I told you guys you should go before the retreat. So these are really old trees. I think they're like 400 years old. And you can just imagine how deep their roots are. You can see so many of the roots on the top of the ground, like they're intense. So thinking about, to hold this tree up, this tree has withstanded Hurricane Katrina, all these rows of trees. They've been standing for hundreds of years. So how deep do their roots have to be in order to hold all of that weight without blowing over in these intense hurricanes, right? This is what we get to start imagining as our energetic body. And just for a moment, close your eyes and imagine yourself as a tree. Imagine what size of the tree we're working with, how tall it goes up into the sky, and then how deep your roots are. So if you think about a really young tree, a baby tree, it's kind of like skinny and scrawny a little bit. The roots aren't super fully into the ground. And if a heavy gust of wind comes, it might knock that tree over. I actually just saw this. We had a hurricane here in Fort Myers a month ago that was really intense. And a lot of the trees literally came out of the ground because their rooting wasn't quite deep enough yet. And I think as a society, this is where we're at. For a lot of reasons that we're going to get into in this presentation today, but also because we're spiritual amateurs. Like here's what I find, and this is my perspective. We have been learning how to work with energy for 30 years. Like this is a skill set that is thousands of years old. I mean, probably from the beginning of the earth, right? So us learning about this for just a couple years, we're babies. We've got to grow really, really deep roots and become really deeply rooted to be able to grow into the full expansion of our energy that we're actually asking for and we're desiring. So anyways, I wanted you to have an image of a tree like this with these beautiful roots. So first, we're going to start our talk today with some of the distortion that we've seen around the lower realm and how we've been sort of scared away from it. So this is one of those things that may not resonate with you. If it doesn't, throw it away. If it does, keep it. It's up to you. So I see all of these realms as living within us. Heaven and hell consciousness living within us. They're not separate. They're not outside of us. They're not something that we die and then we go to one of those places and we're there eternally. I feel that this is something that is living within us in every moment. And we can choose, am I going to experience hell today or am I going to experience heaven? And we all can identify with, what does hell consciousness feel like when we're extremely overwhelmed and worried about stuff and stressed out. I would call that a hell realm. Or when we're in more of a heaven consciousness, we're seeing the beauty in everything. We're at peace. We're still and calm with ourselves. So the first piece of this is looking at these realms actually live within us. They're not separate from us. And when we start to see them as being outside of us or separate, it starts to remove some of our power. So if you want to put in the chat, what are a few things that you think of when you think of hell? Like, what are some words that come to mind or visuals? This imagery might be one of them. Fire, darkness, Hades, punishment, pain, fear, everything is on fire. Yeah. Fear, doubts, worry, chaos, darkness, and pain, suffering. Yeah, so it's not really a space that we want to be like living eternally, right? Agony crawling out of my skin, shame and guilt. Yes. So that is what the underworld has, where our attention has been brought to. That's what we think of when we think of hell, which has corresponded to the underworld in the past. Or you think of Hades with, doesn't he have like bright blue hair or something? Maybe that's from the movie Hercules. Like, I'm not sure. I don't think about Hades too often. But when we think of hell, even children are like, I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to be there forever. I don't want to be stuck there. Even children are aware of this. And so something that occurred with what I would call our programming is, when we think we're going to be stuck in hell forever, of course, we're going to avoid it. We're not going to want to go into those spaces. So we mentioned this, the concept of hell is portrayed as a place filled with demons, blazing fire, and that if you go, you're never going to get to leave. I see, like, probably from scary movies, people's hands coming up and grabbing you by the ankles like lost souls. But it's interesting because a lot of this imagery, and you see this a lot with the church, a lot of the imagery is actually accurate, but it's been distorted or twisted just like a little bit to change our mental perspective of it. So the underworld is a space of fire. Fire is a transformation tool. It is filled with demons, but it's our own inner demons. It's not demons that are outside of us that are like possessing us and, like scary movies would say. They're our own shadows that are just unloved, and so they can become monsters when they're like ignored for 45 years. And it's true that when you go, you're not going to come back the same as the way that you went. You're going to come back transformed and different, even if it's just by a teeny tiny bit. So all of these things are true, but our mental projection of this has been altered a little so that we don't want to go to this space. So hell consciousness really has created this fractalized version of ourself. So for 2000 years, as humanity, as we've avoided these shadow aspects of ourself, because basically we were told all forms of pleasure are shameful and are guiltful, sex is bad, you shouldn't have money, feel guilty for all of your primal innate desires, and we stuff all of that down, we're starting to operate from a fractalized version of self, where we're pushing so much down, and when it's ignored for long enough, then these aspects of ourselves start to express themselves unconsciously. they're repressed and suppressed. And so that's naturally going to happen. That's like when you explode at someone and you're like, whoa, I'm sorry, you didn't, that had nothing to do with you. That's what's been happening in humanity for 2000 years. So hell is really the unseen shadow realm. And after thousands of years of religious teachings that suppress the primal aspects, hold on, like your faces are blocking some of my text, so I can't read it. We've had to renunciate all forms of pleasure, and that's so damaging to our psyche and to, first of all, our quality of life. And a lot of this stuff, we're like, well, that's not really my experience now, but it's the experience of people for the last 2000 years that's traveled through our ancestral lines. So even if we're not like, oh, I have to renunciate all forms of pleasure today, check, did that on the to-do list. It's coming through the belief systems of our great-grandparents, their great-grandparents. All this stuff trickles through, and it's even in the cells of our womb. And then when we look at how humanity's been acting for the last 2000 years, we see all of this colonization, and really this is much longer, like the last 5000 years. So much colonization, slavery, rape, pillaging, not respecting each other, not loving each other. And that also goes just internally for ourselves as well. So also, one of my friends, when I was marketing this class, she was like, did you also know that there's a goddess named Hel? And she's like, I don't know much about her, but so I looked her up, and I'm not going to talk about her too much because I don't know very much about her, but fun fact, Hel originally referred to the Germanic name of the underworld goddess Hel in her earth womb realm. So fun fact for today. This is originally a space of the goddess. So before we go more into the underworld realm, I want to first just talk about the cycles of the feminine. And I am like, learning about this has supported me in my life so much. If you come from a Western civilization, we are raised with masculine structure. We aren't really taught that any of the cycles of the feminine, first of all, exist, but also that they're valuable or beneficial. We see the seasonal cycles, we see the lunar cycles, but just don't think anything of them until we do. So we're like, wait a second, the moon cycle and our menstrual cycle are both 28 or 29 days. Interesting coincidence. And we start to see, oh, you know, with these seasonal cycles, every single year I start to feel differently. I have a lot more energy in the spring and summer, or, you know, we start to notice all of these cycles, and there's so many cycles that we're not aware of. And so like, I see some of the faces here of people in the initiation mastermind, and this is a space where I teach about the cycles that I've identified in our initiations. So there's so many of them, and attuning to ourselves to the cycles of the feminine really allows us to like get back into the actual rhythm of life. Because all of us are familiar with the rat race, getting on the interstate, driving to work, doing this, doing that, going, always the to-do list never ends. And our life doesn't operate like this in a masculine linear structure. It operates in the cycle. We have both of those energies, but we can't forget about the cycles of the feminine. So some of the cycles, we have personal cycles for our own soul path and our own soul blueprint. We have seasonal cycles, of course, like with nature, spring, summer, fall, winter. Collective cycles, like in the last 2 years, we've been going through a major collective cycle of destruction. Ages of time. I love teaching about this, but I'm not going to go into that here because it'll take too long. Of course, the moon cycles, our menstrual cycle, and then astrological cycles, like what's going on with the planets and the stars. So one of the first stories I'm going to share that relates to our understanding of the underworld from goddess myths is Demeter and Persephone. So this is also a story of the maiden and the mother relationship, but we're going to be talking about this more so from the aspect of the seasonal cycles. So Demeter, and these are Greek goddesses. This is storylines from the Greek pantheon. And I wanted to start with saying a lot of the Greek myths have been altered and tampered to shift the relationship of the feminine. So I sort of have a personal grudge with a lot of Greek myths. So I might say this in a little bit of a biased way because of that. A lot of storylines in Greek mythology shift the feminine from making powerful choices to becoming a victim. So that's just something to kind of know. So Demeter in this story, she's the mother, and she is really goddess of fertility. She's goddess of like the fruitfulness of the earth plane. And she's said basically to be raped by like all of these different gods, by Zeus, by I think Zeus is Persephone's father. So immediately I'm like not into this story, but so she gives birth to Persephone, who is her daughter. And one day Persephone is just out in this field, minding her own business, picking flowers. It said that she's picking the narcissus flower. And Hades, our old friend we were talking about, opens up the earth, grabs her, pulls her into the underworld because he decides that he wants her. So he takes her into the underworld. Demeter has no idea where she is. She searches for her for 9 days. And she's like frantic, where is my daughter? No idea. So she goes to the gods and they say, oh, like we gave Hades permission to take her. So she's in the underworld. So Demeter like starts, actually this story interestingly mirrors a lot of the story of Isis and Horus and Osiris as well in the Egyptian pantheon. So she kind of like goes to these different spaces to try to get Persephone back. Nothing really works. She ends up going back to the gods and she's like, I'm going to make the earth completely barren. Nothing will grow until my daughter comes back. So you like get her back, but nothing will grow on the earth and everything will be desolate. The humans here will starve. And so the gods like commune and they're like, okay, well, basically they get Hades and they're like, well, we have to make a compromise with her. And so the compromise is that Persephone will come back from the underworld for 2/3 out of the year, and she'll spend 1/3 of the year with Hades in the underworld. But before she comes back, Hades gives her a pomegranate to eat, which is a sign of the goddess, and this is a sign of fertility. But it also, in the underworld, apparently one of the rules is if you eat pomegranate seeds, it represents eternal marriage. So he hands her a pomegranate, she eats it, basically tricking her to stay married to him. So like not, seems pretty toxic masculine. And so she comes back up to earth, she tells her mom what's happened. And so she has to honor the marriage. So my whole point in sharing this story is that this is the introduction of the winter months. So while Persephone is in the underworld, this is like the halfway through fall and through winter. So that's why in this mythical story, that's why during the winter we see leaves fall off and, you know, there's not as much fruitfulness and everything becomes more barren. And then in the springtime, that's when Persephone is returning. And you start to see the blooming and she's bringing back the fertility, the fruitfulness of the land. So you can see just in this story, these traditions, altered or not in this specific story, honor the cycles of life. So that's the first story we're going to talk about today. So these different seasonal cycles, this is how most people would see them. Winter being the underworld season, spring being the rebirth, summer being the harvest, and then fall, of course, releasing and letting everything go. Oh, wait, I want to talk about this again first. So within these seasonal cycles, like it's just kind of interesting because as humans, we're like, the moon has a cycle, the tides have a cycle, or like tides are moving in a certain rhythm. We have these seasonal cycles, but like, nope, I work totally linearly. And so when we start to look at what are my own cycles in relation perhaps to your period, I think it's probably only women who will watch this video, in relation to your period, but also in relation to your energy. This is also something that I found such great value in human design and understanding my energetic cycles. That's also one that I didn't mention here. So looking at how we are cyclical beings, and I want to talk about this for a moment. So it's so interesting because you guys already know this, like in all religions, there's so many different parallels. And so of course in Christianity, we have the Holy Trinity. In the Hindu tradition, they have the 3 aspects of the Godhead. And this is something that I use in my initiations with people, individual, and also I have a group mastermind. So there's 3 aspects of of the godhead. The first is the creator. So in Hindu tradition, this would be Brahma and Saraswati. In Egyptian pantheon, this would be Hathor. It could be a lot of different gods or goddesses, but Hathor would be a great representation. If you're familiar with the Magdalene Rose line, she would be the one here. The sustainer, Vishnu and Lakshmi, which I actually, you can't really see it up here. I have a whole little like altar to Lakshmi up here. And then the destroyer, Shiva and Shakti. So going back to the sustainer in the Egyptian pantheon, this would be Isis and Osiris. And the destroyers would be Set. It could also be Sekhmet, could be Kali. So there's these three different stages of the cycle: the creator, the sustainer, and the destroyer. So this is just another cycle that we see. Also the cycle of the triple goddess. So three different aspects of us in our lifetime. And we actually hold all of these different embodiments at once: the maiden, the mother, and the crone. The maiden, of course, is, you could think of like as the princess. The mother you could think of as the queen, and then the crone is like maybe the one who was queen and she's no longer queen. She's the father of the mother of the queen. Old, wise, really just doesn't give a fuck anymore. Like she just is going to totally be herself. Some people might call her a little bit crazy. So I wanted to just introduce some of these aspects of all the different cycles that we have. And this is something that I incorporate into all of my work because we are cyclical beings, and it's important that we recognize that. So when we're coming into this experience of the underworld, we're understanding that the underworld is also an aspect of this cycle. And really what the whole vibe of the underworld is how can we be comfortable in this space? How can we be like excited to go into the underworld, into the lower world, into the womb of creation? How can we be totally fine spending time in this space because it's a part of our natural cycle? And how can we honor our wholeness and mend these fragmented parts of self back together? Because for most people, the underworld is full of fragmented parts of yourself, and that might be called demons. But they're friends once you love them. And also, just with all of these teachings, these are mysteries. No one can explain to you what the underworld is. Like, I'm doing my best, but no one can explain this to you. It's a mystery that can only be understood through experience. When you see things called mystery schools, that's what they're talking about. When you hear about initiations, it's the same thing. It's not something that can be given to us in a masculine. Okay, number one, first, dissolve. Second, we can't go through this in a list. This is something that can only be experienced, and every single time you go into this space, it's going to be different. So how we usually enter the underworld, this is what I've seen with myself, with clients. Each experience can be really different, but usually our first full like venture in the underworld is because we've lost a major part of our identity. Maybe it's been a lot of things at once. That's how it was for me. But losing your identity could look like leaving a relationship you've been in for a long time, or being left, losing a job, losing a family member or someone really close to you, something that like has a hold on your actual identity, how you see yourself. And so you enter the underworld and you're like, who am I? Because this role has been stripped. Now I don't know who I am. And we've lived in this space for so long where all these roles define us that we actually don't know who we are underneath the roles. So I just want to like caveat with this, how we experience the underworld now, I don't think is what the experience was 4,000 years ago or 6,000 years ago, because we have so much trauma, we have so much programming that simply was not there in those time frames. And so I think that the experience is a little different. And first we have to clear all of that, which very well could take our whole lifetime to do so. But we get samples and tastes of what these beautiful primordial women and priestesses were doing in these spaces as well. You can also enter the underworld when you are consciously choosing to transform yourself. That will be a little bit of a different experience. So it's like when you go in there because the rug has been pulled out from under you and you're like, oh my God, that's going to feel different than when you choose to go in. The first time, it's not going to be a choice. After that, you know what the experience is like and you can choose to go back in. Then the other way is if we're experiencing a dark night of the soul, which is similar to we've lost an aspect of our identity, but it's a little bit more intense. If you want to know more about the dark night of the soul, I have a YouTube video coming out on Monday that's about that. So you can watch that there. So like I said, this is a feminine mystery. It can only be experienced. Okay, I'm going to stop here and just see if anybody has any questions for a second before we go into the realm of the goddess and the dark feminine. Does anybody have any questions, or you guys are good? I'll just wait a second. I'm going to take a sip of my tea. Okay, so we will continue. So entering the realm of the goddess, this is a very different sort of space than where we are used to living in our normal life. And what we've seen as role and in our modeling of women, of authority figures, this is a totally different energy, even of God. I was reading in this book and they said, God is a widower. God is like a sad widower waiting for his beloved to come back. And I was just like, oh, because God, and this is my opinion and my thought process, has been picked apart and distorted so much that it's not the fullness of the divinity of just like this creator that loves us all so deeply. So the goddess knows and honors all aspects of herself. There's no part of herself that she shies away from, that she's shameful of, that she feels guilty over. She fully embraces everything. So like another word you could say for that is she's completely unapologetic. She's not apologizing for any aspect of herself. This is a huge aspect of what our journey in the underworld is about. Really going to see the parts of ourselves that we haven't loved, that we've pushed down, like, you can fit in my collarbone. Just go back into my hip. It's fine. I don't want to deal with you. You're ugly. I don't want people to see you. Can you fit in my ankle? Just stay down there. And what happens, and of course, we're not like choosing where these things go, but as we repress parts of ourselves, they stay in our body. They transform into diseases. They transform into so much just like heavy energy in our bodies that's holding us back. So coming into the underworld, into this space, is a space of reclamation of your power. And the energies that you first see that you might call demons eventually will become superpowers. And this is absolutely true. So I love this quote, and I wanted to include it from Saren and Azra Bertrand. The mystery of the abyss is the mystery of creation itself that emerges from the dark, swirling feminine vortex, the dazzling darkness, the deep ocean of unmanifest potential that births us from all of its waters. That births us all from its waters. This is the feminine energy. This is the feminine energy. And what we've seen and experienced of feminine energy is so fragmented, but she's full, and we get to experience her in the underworld. So a question that I want you to ask yourself is, does depth scare you? Because the primordial feminine is very, 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 very deep. It's like going to the deepest aspect of the ocean, where there's those really scary fish that have the light thing, the light bulb hangs here. And she lives there. She also lives as the mermaid, beautifully laying on the rock seductively. She also is the gorgeous fish that are swimming around in the coral. She's all the aspects of that. And so you might be like, yeah, I'm cool with the mermaid. Like, I love that feminine energy. Do you also love the piranhas and the Amazon? That aspect of you? Do you love the scary light bulb fish version of you, or the monster that lives 25,000 leagues under the sea? You can think about it in that way. All of these different aspects of the creatures that live within the ocean. Are you embodying that aspect of yourself? That actually just came to me. So thank you, Spirit. That was a great example. So as we mentioned, your first visit into the underworld is likely to begin with a massive unraveling. It's likely that you're going to be rolled into the underworld and you're like, where the fuck am I? And how did I get here? And what is happening? And like, I've lost everything and I don't know what's going on. It's likely that that's the first experience. And I think that, you know, seasonally we do visit the underworld, but there are different levels. We could be visiting like the lobby. We could be visiting the basement, that's like the scary basement that's of the abandoned house that no one's been to in 500,000 years. So we experience different levels of it. What we're going to be talking about today is like the full experience of the underworld, because we've all had little experiences. And each time you visit the space will be different. So we're talking about the full journey in the underworld today. Depending on your specific journey, this might be something that's like super tumultuous or something that's really quiet and still and like somewhat peaceful. Basically, it depends on how much you've surrendered to it and how comfortable you are, because the more times that you go into this space, the more you work with the cycles of life, the more you actually understand like, oh, I'm totally safe within this. This is a natural aspect of me, of my life. I trust this. I trust it. Instead of like, I should be perpetually in spring and summer. I should always be productive. I should always be creating. Like something's wrong. I'm not safe because things aren't coming in or because I feel this certain way. Once you go through this cycle enough times, you start to have a lot of confidence and trust in it. And that's when it can start to become more peaceful, because you're like, oh, I just have to let go completely. I just have to fall off the edge of the cliff. No big deal. But at first it's like, ah, at first it's terrifying, but then you just trust it. So you're like hoping for the best. And that's when some of this starts to become fun and when you can enjoy being in this space. The first time moving through it, like I say here, your ass might be dragged. That's okay. When your ass is being dragged, it's just like, why am I holding on? Just let go. So for a lot of us, this is where we truly learn what surrender means. And like, I think all of us think that we've surrendered, and then we're like, oh, I actually really haven't. I've surrendered. You just have one little pinky up, you know. I forget that you guys can't see my whole thing because I'm just a little thing in the screen up here. So lay down your attachments and just let yourself keep surrendering. How can I surrender more to this? How can I surrender more? And I feel maybe this is going on in someone's mind right now. Some people might have a story about this being like lazy, or this being like letting go isn't safe. That's definitely a collective story. But like, I have to keep trying. I can't give up. Surrendering isn't the same thing as giving up. Surrendering is like, I'm trusting, first of all, myself to lead me through this, but I'm also I let go of control. I'm letting go of the control. They're two really different things. So once you stop resisting the underworld, it sort of moves from this like dark blue place, like we were talking about Hades with the bright blue hair and like scariness, even the coloring I used here. It moves from that space into the womb of creation, which is like, this is where we feel more feminine energy. Now, it might still be Kali or like a terrifying monster that comes out of this cave, but there's more feminine energy to it. So the vibe is a little bit different. So welcome to the womb of creation. Now we've moved out of the underworld and into the womb of creation. This is really the space of the ancient feminine, the space of primordial rebirth. So what to expect here? Even though I said there's not a list, here's my best list I could come up with. Number 1, dissolution, aka melting. Number 2, potential insanity. You will forget who you are and think that you're losing your mind, but you're just losing an aspect of your ego. Then there will be death. You won't come back the same way, but it's just the death of a layer of your ego. It's not, of course, physical death. It might be a psychological death. Then after that, you'll be rebirthed into the void. So you might recognize this phase as when you're like, whoa, I'm not really quite sure what just happened, but things, it's like when you're integrating big shifts and changes, you're rebirthed into the space of stillness. So we do this process in the initiation mastermind. This is a major process of the initiation itself. And then you're reborn into the middle world, like our current reality here on planet Earth. Then you experience the rebirth there, where it's starting to come more into like physical material plane, where you might start to be feeling differently and seeing a lot of things coming in that are showing you a physical rebirth. But all of that can only happen if you let yourself melt. And the imagery of the caterpillar, you guys are familiar with this probably. The caterpillar goes into its cocoon and literally completely dissolves into liquid. It lets go of its form as a caterpillar. So that's what we're doing in this phase. We're like, I trust my liquidness to transform into something that is of my highest good. It's trusting the process of transformation. That's the only way that the caterpillar can become the butterfly. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to do this because first of all, it's scary, especially the first time. It requires you to let go of all control. And one of like the biggest fears that humans hold is the fear of death, right? So it's literally facing this fear head on. For a lot of people, when they're in this phase in the underworld, you might physically ask yourself, am I alive? Like I definitely did in my first full experience in the underworld. Am I actually alive in this moment? Did I already die? So that question might scare you. But what happens also after you are rebirthed from this space, you're not afraid of death because you've already faced it. Like, no, everything is actually just constantly transforming. What's that like scientific phrase? Energy is never destroyed, it's only transferred, or something like that. If you know the real quote, please put it in the chat. I like always butcher quotes, especially if they're scientific. So energy is always just transferring, being recreated into something different. So we can never really die. And this is something that you'll start to really, really like understand, and it changes your fear of death, like stopping it, at least for me. So this question, how can you allow your dissolution to be ecstatic? At first you're going to be like, ecstatic, I'm being dragged. And it might feel so tumultuous and scary. Don't ask this question if you're in that stage. This question is for when you've released, when you've let go of the rope that you were holding on to and was giving you rope burn. This is the question you tune into, like, what if melting could actually be enjoyable? Because I'm not fighting against it. How could it actually be something that's like orgasmic? How could it be something that feels so fulfilling and like we're proud of ourselves, instead of like, I should be working on this report, or I should be working on this other thing right now, but I'm choosing to melt again. The law of conservation of energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. Thank you, Eliza. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only converted from one form of energy to another. Yes. Thank you guys for having me with the scientific stuff. Okay. So we've already talked about this, allowing the dissolution, allowing the melting. And I wanted to speak to this. This page isn't so pretty, but when I talk about depth, this requires a huge amount of psychological bravery, because it's facing these aspects of yourself that like no one is portraying in social media or in our life or in our role models. Nobody's showing us these aspects of ourselves. There's very, very, very few people who are willing to showcase that part of themselves, like the raging jealous part of you, or the part of you that's like feels murderous or something, or the part of you that gets so angry that you would like never want someone to see, or the part of you that's so insecure. You're like, if people heard the sort of stuff I say in my mind, like, these are the aspects of ourselves that we hold shame and guilt over, or also like our primal sexuality. This is a huge one, like your kinks or the things that you are actually really into, but you're like, God, I hope no one ever finds out about this. There's so much programming related to a lot of these things, or our true self-expression. So going to the depth is looking at these parts of yourself and then bringing them into your current embodiment, and then feeling the uncomfortability of that and loving that aspect of you until you mold together. So yeah, we're going to talk about that more, and you're going to experience that a little in the Akashic experience today. So what is the reward of all of this work? Because melting might not sound so fun to you. So like we started this conversation off with, when we go into these deep parts of ourselves, it's also going to be reflected in the upper world. So in my experience, and what I see with clients all the time, is the deeper that we go within, first of all, the truer you become, the more authentic you become effortlessly. I'm seeing some head nods and smiles. Also, a lot of us like want to expand our spiritual gifts, our intuitive gifts. This naturally happens. When you give yourself the space to go into your real depth, it's like you're given more access in the upper world because you're capable of handling more. This is a huge gift. And you'll also experience this with each round. Like just personally, I've experienced this so much in my work in the Akashic Records with people. Like I'll go through a major space of depth, and then I'll experience my sessions with people deepening, and I'm like, where did that come from? That's pretty cool. So from this space, we can gain access to the magic of the divine ancestresses. This is the yum. I like love this part so much. So if you resonate with being a priestess, I feel like first I should just talk about what a priestess actually is, because there might be people who are watching later that aren't familiar with that. So the term priest is actually a really ancient term. It didn't start with the church that we're aware of today. There were high priests in all of these different ancient lineages that operated really truly with full divinity, holding consciousness for a lot of different people, holding consciousness for their whole civilization. And they would work magic, and it's like hard to even put it into words, but they just had this beautiful essence to them that was truly in devotion to the heart, truly in devotion to the divinity of us as humans, and stewarding that through the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the mediocreness of life, like the boring parts of life, mundane, that's what I was looking for, the mundane aspects of our life, holding the sacred through all of that. So they were kind of stewarding that. So when we talk about this lower realm, the people, the goddesses, the energies who are stewarding this realm, you could call them the dragon priestesses. These are all lines of the Magdalene energy, the rose lineage. Serpent priestesses, shamankas, which are female shamans, red witches, and also elemental beings. So I want to talk about this image for a moment. So this is called the caduceus, and you've probably seen this before. It might be familiar. This is actually the symbol, the like American Medical Association symbol, which is pretty ironic. I'm not sure that they actually know what it means, but I want you to first just look at this imagery and like put it into your brain, because I'm going to ask you to come back to this imagery in the Akashic part at the end of this. So if we're looking at this, you can see there's a central spinal column here. So there's a central rod. This is representative of your central energy channel. Then you see the two snakes. So you might be like, ooh, snakes. We're going to talk about that. Serpents and snakes have such medicine, and they've actually been really demonized. And just like the feminine, they represent the full spectrum. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But you can see there's two serpents here who are intertwining up this energetic column and meeting at the top. And then up here, you see the wings at the top. And so I had this like huge aha moment. I love dragons, and I'll probably teach another thing about dragons. And this might be the first time you're hearing about dragons like ever, or, in this sort of class. Dragons are actually snakes with wings. Not sure if that's like a big deal for anyone else, but it was for me. And so dragons, if you think about them, they're portrayed in a lot of myths with the goddess. They are actually representations of the goddess. And dragons are representations of primordial Shakti. They're representations of divine power. And so they say that the dragons have been split into two different energies. One, the divine mind, and two, the divine power. And so when you think of a dragon, you probably think of like a fire-breathing dragon, right? So when we think about these two different aspects, one of these aspects within us has been basically turned off, has been dormant for a very, very long time. So we're going to keep talking about this. But this also, like we were saying, in so many different religions, this is a concept that's talked about in multiple cultures in different ways. So if you study yoga, you'll hear about the Sushumna. So the Sushumna is the central energetic column. And then there's also the Ida and Pingala energy lines, and these move up the different meridians. So this imagery is also representing our Kundalini energy. So we'll talk about that in a moment as well. This is something that those priestesses we were just speaking of were working with Kundalini energy and supporting. This is life force energy rising up in our body. This is an intense experience. So this whole image is the caduceus, and it's really representing the full realm of the descent of the underworld down here. You could think of this as our root chakra in the chakra body, and then moving up into like full ascension into the upper realms. But all aspects are needed. You can't like cut off and just be the top part of it. All of these aspects are needed. And also the dove is representative of the cosmic womb. And you see in a lot of like Christianity, we see the dove represented as purity, as holiness. You'll also see in ancient Egyptian imagery, you'll see that they wore the caduceus on the crowns. Royalty and the goddesses would, and that would represent that their Kundalini energy had fully risen when I think it came out of the third eye or out of the crown, and they were fully awakened. Okay, now let's talk about dragon magic. So dragon magic is primordial power, and this correlates a lot with the conversation around the dark feminine, which our dark feminine energy really lives in this shadowy space. This could be just like anything. You could even apply this to money. Anything can be used with great intentions or with malicious intentions. So a dragon, if you think about it this way, or fire in general, could burn down a whole village. But fire also cooks your food. It gives you warmth. It keeps you alive if you're somewhere cold, right? So with all of this conversation, we can be using this power in whatever way we are holding inside. So truthfully, I feel a lot of different cultures or a lot of different beings of great power have been using this primordial power for negative things. So more of us who have who want to support the world, who have beautiful hearts, who want to be sharing our magic, get to tap into this energy so that we can be using power from a space of divinity. So, like I said, there's these twin dragons that were shown on the caduceus image, and there's the Shakti, which is fire. So this could be the version of ourselves that can be rage, right? Or it can be motivation when it's balanced in an attunement. And there's also the divine mind, which is how we're receiving things. You could also think about this as being masculine and feminine energy. And there's a lot more I could say about dragons, but that's a different masterclass. I'm not sure if you guys want to know all that. Okay, so going back to sort of the OG goddesses, I feel like that's disrespectful. Maybe I shouldn't say it that way. The ancient goddesses of the primordial womb, that's better. So these twin dragons, it said that the first energies of the feminine that were created were Namu, and she was a sacred keeper of the waters. And then Hor, which the wording is interesting. We're going to talk about that in a second. She was a stoker of the fire within earth. So you even see within this, that same concept of the divine mind and divine power. So Ninersag was basically the daughter of Namu, of the water goddess. So she also was known as Gaia. She was born into the middle earth, the middle world. And so she is represented by this omega symbol over here on the right. And you also see, like with Goddess Hathor, her hairstyle looks just like this. And so it's interesting, a lot of these different, and of course this is a symbol for the womb also. And like there's a lot of goddess imagery on literally on caves that show drawings like this, where ancient people would be worshiping the goddess in literally the womb. The womb was the religion of so many of these ancient cultures. Okay, I've got to take a breath. I get real excited about this. So Ninersag is also, if you're looking at the rose line, the rose lineage, she would be considered the great grandmother of Mary Magdalene. And she's also known as literally the womb dragon, queen of the sacred whore, which a lot of words, and I teach this in a lot of my different classes, have been shifted over time, whether purposely or just, through different translations. Whore basically meant the sacred womb. And so it's interesting how these forms of vocabulary have shifted. So then we have Inanna, and more of you are probably familiar with her. I'm just looking at the imagery here. So Inanna is seen more so as like the daughter of Ninersag, and all of these different goddesses transform in time. So you could think of them as being the same energy, but transforming throughout time based on the culture, like little aspects of them would change. So she's also basically the energy of Ishtar. This shift happened in 2350 BCE, according to my studies. So she was called the Queen of Heaven, also the Great Whore of Babylon. You might have heard that in different religious texts. And this would have been a huge compliment. We don't think, like, it wasn't depicted this way in the religious text, right? This would have been a really large compliment, because it was basically saying the sacred womb, which was the most sacred thing of all things. The womb birthed life. And so Inanna is one of the last goddesses that we really see that represents the full feminine. After Inanna, there's a little bit more fractalizing of like, well, this aspect of her is good, so let's keep this part, but like, this happens a lot with the Greek pantheon, which is what I was talking about. I used to have sort of a grudge, but like, these are just aspects. We get to be the full-fledged feminine. So anyways, Inanna is spanning the deep roots of the earth, of the underworld, all the way up into the upper world, Queen of Heaven. Oh, and I'm just seeing it's 11:11 in San Diego. Magic. So serpent priestesses worked with all of this energy and honor more of the dark feminine principle. But a lot of us see even still this dark feminine energy being depicted through like, how can I seduce in a like way that's not super ethical, or how can I manipulate? That's not what this energy is. That's one way of expressing it. Just like with your money, you can do great things with money, or you can fund wars. It's not about the actual principle itself. It's about how someone is using it. So here is artwork of Inanna. You can see the dragon in the background. That's why I was like, gotta include this one. Excuse me. So Inanna specifically was known as mistress of the underworld, but so are these serpent goddesses and priestesses. These priestesses that were said to be the daughters of these dragon mothers. And so they were really working with this energy. And someone probably has lineage in this, or maybe even past life skill coming through in this lifetime, when they're really enchanting, great storytellers. You can imagine like the snake charmers or belly dancers, like women who are just so comfortable in their body, and they're undulating their body, and they're enchantresses, mesmerizing. They also had really, really deep gifts. And so at this time, these women weren't seen as, like, now we might see someone like that, and there's probably a whole lot of distortion being thrown on them. That wasn't the case in these times, and that's what's coming. So this is the work we're doing to restore that fully. So serpent medicine. When I was creating this slide, I was thinking, whoa, like Britney Spears, remember when she had the snake in that VMAs performance or whatever, like 20 years ago, Like that's actually a major, that was actually probably like a planned divine moment from source, starting to bring back the power of the serpent priestess. Whenever things, I'm just like, whenever things happen with celebrities on a large scale, even recently, the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial, like seeing toxic femininity put on a stage, these are all things for us to be looking at within ourselves. So, okay, back to serpent medicine. So snakes have really been distorted. And like I said before, they have a full spectrum of energy. So on one hand, they're one of the most grounded animals, one of the most grounded energies for us to work with. Their bellies are on the earth almost always, unless they're climbing up a tree or swimming. They are belly to the earth always. They also are beautiful support systems for our transformation. This is how most people now, and I think if you're here, this might be how you associate snakes, shedding their skin regularly. They're in this cycle of birth, regeneration, death, rebirth. So there's a lot of magic to their energy, and they come into your life too to tell you like, hey, some things need to go. There's some things that need to be released. But they're also this force of Kundalini energy. And in ancient Egypt, cobras literally represented the divine awakening of this energy. And they also can represent, and this is something that I feel is depicted with the Adam and Eve story, secret information or hidden mysteries that aren't suitable for everyone. So like I mentioned, there's this shaming that's also occurred with snakes. Like universe, I'm not really trying to have a snake in my house, but if one passes outside, I'm like, oh, what's my message? What is the message of this? What is the meaning? Why am I seeing this snake? I'm not welcoming one in my house. But this energy has been really demonized because there's also the side of the snake that we all have that could be manipulative, that could be deceitful, or is like slimy, or like, snakes can see perfectly in the dark. So there's this energy of snakes that scares us. But also we have to ask, like, what is it, the snake within us? Are we owning that aspect of ourselves? What are we afraid of? The snake is truly dark feminine energy. So, and of course, the most, what I would say is probably the most significant mention is Adam and Eve, this picture, which I'm like, wow, this is not a flattering picture really of either of them, although it's art and obviously not like a photograph, although Adam's sort of ripped. But anyway, you can see up in the top corner the snake here representing Lilith, and also the peacock, which the peacock actually is a representation of the dragons and of this serpentine priestess lineage. So there's all these things represented in these stories that people 1500 years ago would have heard these stories from their grandparents or from their parents, that they would have been aware of like what this stuff meant. But today, because it's been so lost, we don't know that peacocks actually represent dragons, or that dragons are not just mythical creatures. We don't know so many different things, or that a pomegranate is a representation of the goddess. So this is why we're educating ourselves about all of this. So the goddess tradition, the ancient feminine, was really exiled a few hundred years after Jesus, but during his time frame, it was like pretty on the outskirts. So the last goddess temple that's documented was destroyed about 500 BC. But really, the patriarchy started to take things over around 2500 BC. So there was thousands of years of a gradual shift that happened. And in the last 2000 years, the age of Pisces, this is where we've really seen, it's called the darkest of the ages. This is where we've seen the results of that. And all of us know about, we've experienced personally probably, or at least have seen in the world, how the feminine energy just isn't really around. Actually, it is. That's not the right way to put it, but it's been exiled. It's pushed away. It's not considered as valuable as masculine energy. All of this is changing by doing things like this and studying this and bringing your own feminine energy back into your life fully and organizing your life around it just as much as you prioritize masculine energy, this is how things change. So throughout this time, renunciation, guilt, and shame are like rampant, and our shadow selves are growing, and we're starting to express ourselves unconsciously from that space. And the interesting part of this that I ask myself, and no one will know the answer to this, was this all intentional for us to lose our power and be easily controlled? Or is it just something that naturally happened? Regardless, we're reversing this process. So things are changing. So when we are afraid of going into the underworld, what we're really afraid of is the full feminine, because most of us haven't experienced the full, like, healthy feminine. A lot of you guys are coming in now, which is interesting. I hope you knew the right time. So we're afraid of experiencing that full deep feminine because we really don't have very many examples of it. We see these fractalized versions of the feminine. And for some reason, like, Jennifer Lopez is coming to mind. I don't know why she's coming to my mind as someone thinking about her. And I was actually just watching her Netflix documentary like a couple weeks ago. And she was talking about how a huge part of her journey was owning her sexuality and like being fully comfortable on that. And then looking at where she is now, and her journey has been like many, many decades. And she's being able to use that in a huge way, but also creating a whole awakening with that energy herself. But she was also talking about being able to be taken seriously with that energy. And anyway, so when we go into the underworld, away from Jennifer Lopez, back to the underworld, we're starting to bring ourselves into the awareness of what is the full feminine energy. And it's sort of like when you're introduced to Kali, it's like, oh, I'm a little afraid of seeing her. So Kali is also very misunderstood. So Arish Kagal, we've talked about Inanna. Arish Kagal is said to be Inanna's sister. We'll talk about their story in just a minute. She's also a mirror to Lilith and Eve, both representing dark feminine energy and this energy that's like really not allowed in our society, or is shunned, or is pushed away, or is like, she is too much. So, okay, so let's talk about Inanna and Arish Kagal. So these are the two of them. So hold on, let me just like take a breath. Okay, so the story of Inanna and Arish Kagal, this is really the classic story of the mythic underworld experience. So Inanna begins to hear Arish Kagal crying down from in the underworld. That's where she lives, and Inanna lives in the upper world and in the middle world. She hears her sister crying, and so she tells her friend, I'm going to go visit Arish Kagal. And she's like, no, you can't. That's in the underworld. You can't go there. You won't come back. She's like, I just have to. It's my sister. I hear her crying. I have to go. I feel this deep call. And so she gets ready and she goes into the underworld. And when she reaches the gates of the underworld, the guardians of this space say, there are different rules here. Are you sure that you want to come? There are different rules here. Are you ready? She says, yes. So there are 7 different gates, which this is also depicted in a lot of different religious stories, cultures. There's 7 gates that Inanna has to go through. And at each gate, she has to take something off of her material experience. So she comes in like, look at Inanna here. She's dressed to the nines. She's got her leopard skin. She's got her panther crown thing up here with a nice ruby at the top. She's got her beautiful jewelry. So at each of these gates, she has to take one of those things off. And so when you're thinking about your own experience in the underworld, you're being asked to take off aspects of your identity. Oh, who am I when I'm not making this amount of money? Who am I when I'm not a sister? Who am I when I'm not in a beautiful apartment? Who am I when I'm not all the things you might label yourself as? And so by the time she goes through the 7th gate, she is naked and sort of like, you know, like a little beaten down. Like if you lost your job, lost your relationship, were put in a new space, all these different things at once, you're a little bit like down on yourself, right? You're like, I don't know who I am. So this is how she's entering the underworld. And she sees Ereshkigal there once she's through all the 7 gates. And Ereshkigal is pissed. She's like, why have I been left down here all by myself? She's been, in the story, she's been abused by the different gods who come to visit her. Whereas in the initial stories, the stories were that gods would come to see her on her command, and she would have sex with them for 6 days straight, because in the underworld, the sexual appetite is quite large. So she was in the power position in those energies. So are they, though, because the gods were coming to her from conscious choice. I think it seems like they were enjoying themselves. Anyway, so Ereshkigal is also mad. The shadow aspect of herself is in full force. She's not in her balanced state. She's upset. And so she kills Inanna. She's like, you've left me down here. You don't get to go back to being the queen of heaven. Why do you get to play that role and I have to be the devil of the underworld? So she kills her. She hangs her on a meat hook. Why a meat hook, I'm not sure, but this is just what the story is. So Inanna, before she had left, told her friend, her servant, she said, if I don't come back in 3 days, tell the gods. So it's been 3 days, 3 days have passed. Her servant goes to the gods and she's like, Inanna hasn't come back. And they're like, well, she shouldn't have gone to the underworld. So she has to go to all of these different gods because she broke the rules. So they're like, oh, well, it's her fault. We're not going to help her, which is interesting. Eventually, one of the gods says, I believe it's God Enki, god of the waters, which he also stole a role from the goddess. But anyways, Enki says, okay, well, I'm going to create these 2 flies out of clay from underneath my fingernail, and I'm going to send them down to the underworld, and they're going to sort things out. So these 2 flies go down to the underworld, and they see Ereshkigal, and she's laying on the floor, like so upset. And she's like, okay, my husband is dead, which her husband had also died. And I just killed my sister. Like everything's done. I'm so, she's just overridden with guilt and grief. And she's just, it's like those rock bottom moments where you're crying on the bathroom floor. That's where she's at. And so the flies just listen to her. They're like, oh yeah, this has happened. I hear you. I see you in that. I'm witnessing you. And she starts to feel seen and understood for the first time in forever. And so she's starting to be a little bit more agreeable and amendable. And the flies go over to Inanna hanging on the meat hook, and they start sneaking her food. And so Inanna comes back to life, having this nourishment. And the 2 of them then are both feeling more seen and understood. Inanna has gone through this initiation process of passing through death. And so she goes back up into the upper world, and then she becomes, the 2 sisters merge together, just like in the serpent, in the caduceus imagery, and they form into one. And Inanna becomes the queen of the underworld and also the queen of heaven. So that's where we see the deep roots of the tree connecting all the way up through the middle world, through the trunk of the tree, and up into the upper world in the branches. So that is the story of Inanna and Ereshkigal. And basically, when we go into the underworld, we're finding these parts of us. We're finding our Ereshkigal that's furious and pissed, and she's been hidden in these different parts of our body that we've repressed all these aspects of her and pretended she doesn't exist. She's like, I exist. Look at me. I exist enough that I can kill you. So when you go into the underworld, you're not going to physically die, but aspects of you will. The aspects of you that feel superior to these parts of you that are Ereshkigal. So also just briefly, and I'm going to talk a little faster here because I'm seeing we're at, let's see, I've already gone about an hour and a half. So if you need to leave early, it's okay. Because I want to get through all of this. It feels really important. So there's a lot of these different representations of the number 7 throughout different cultures. So Yeshua was said to remove 7 sins from Mary Magdalene, which some people say that these were cleansing of the chakras, or moving through the 7 gates, or perhaps Magdalene and was doing this for Yeshua. whatever it is you choose to believe, there are 7 gateways in this, in their experience together. And then also in the resurrection story, so how we mentioned with Inanna, she was in the underworld for 3 days. Jesus is also in the tomb for 3 days before he resurrects. There's so many stories that are utilizing these same pathways, the same storylines. And we're not told like, oh, this is actually a story that's 10,000 years old. It's not just the story of Jesus, which is just like, could we have the full set of information? Thanks. Also, in the Egyptian pantheon, Isis and Osiris also sort of embody the same thing that Magdalene and Jesus did in different ways. So we're not going to go into the full story here, but Osiris was basically cut up into a bunch of pieces by his brother and into 14 pieces, 2 sets of 7. And so it's said that when this is discussed in the relationship to sacred union or the divine masculine and feminine together, then it would be 2 sets of 7. And then the 14 segments of Osiris became the 14 stations of the cross in the Catholic doctrine, each being a gateway passed by Jesus on his way to spiritual death and resurrection. So, like I said before, and when we're going into the underworld, we're finding these parts of ourselves that we've cut off and said, you're actually ugly, no one can see you. And I'm going to lock the door so nobody has access to you and you'll never be able to get out because you're a psycho and nobody can see this part of you. We have to address those parts because otherwise that part of us will rage inside and create problems. And she's just asking to be loved. That's it. And then she turns into a superpower. So when we talk about Inanna and Ereshkigal, there's also so many representations of this through different mythic experiences of the goddess. So here is Eve and Lilith. Again, not like there's not that many great pictures of Eve. Like I'd kind of rather be Lilith. But these are the 2 aspects. So Eve is like the Christed feminine. She's the perfect wife. And Lilith is sort of seen as like the mistress. But both of these energies are supposed to be coming together. They're not separated. So that's just one example. These are aspects of the twin dragon. Here, both these pictures are epic. So we have Hathor on the left with her sistrum and with the cobra, and she's walking the lion. And on the right, we have Sekhmet. Sekhmet is this bloodthirsty goddess of war. She's the goddess of plagues. So she came in full force with COVID. Like, you guys have really messed some stuff up. We're going to come in and clear everything so that there can be a new start. So Sekhmet is the wild, fierce, bloodthirsty aspect of Hathor, who is like a goddess of fertility, goddess of wealth, goddess of love, sexuality. They're 2 faces to the same goddess. And so when they're in balance, they're in harmony and union. But when Sekhmet's bloodthirsty and raging, like she'll take out, there's stories of her like taking out the whole, like all of humanity, which maybe she was doing that with COVID a bit. So here we have Isis and Nephthys. So Isis is the Egyptian goddess here. And then her sister, Nephthys, who's like literally never talked about. And she's seen more as being like the high priestess, the one between the veils. There's not as much of a demonization of Nephthys. She's just sort of like invisible. Like no one ever talks about her. They're twin sisters. And then here we have Osiris on the left, who is Isis's husband, and Set. So Set is the one who kills Osiris. He chops him up into 14 pieces, scatters him all across the world. Isis then has to go find him, and she puts the pieces back together, resurrects him, creates a baby, Horus, and then Osiris is king of the underworld or lord of the underworld. But so Osiris is really seen as like, he can do no wrong. Like he's just kingly. He's this divine, sacred masculine. And Set is like, don't even say his name. Satan is based on Set, like obviously, just based on the names. Set is also a god of war. It's like, we each have both of these aspects to us. So why are we saying that the Osiris in us is so holy and the Set is like, just keep him locked in a room? That's not how it works. We're bringing all these aspects of us back together. So those are just some different examples. So that is the class for today. And I want to talk just for a few minutes before we go into the winner of the giveaway prize and then also into the Akashic Records experience. I want to talk about my group mastermind called Initiation. So like I said, I'm really, quite honestly, obsessed with supporting people with these cycles of life and like really bringing them into your experience in a way where your life actually works with all of these cycles. So in Initiation, and there's actually some of you guys here. I'm just looking at your faces. I'm scrolling through these images. Okay. So there's some of you guys here who are in the Initiation Mastermind. This came through last year for me as like, this is something that has to be created to support us in embodying these deeper aspects of ourselves that are really asking to be fully unleashed. So if you guys who are here, if you want to say anything about it in the chat, feel free, no pressure. But this is the work we're doing. So this is a group mastermind for 2023 next year. This is going to be a 10-month experience. So it's like extra long. It's going to be so juicy. And basically we're stepping into a quantum portal together. And what happens in this initiation is like, I'm creating it, but I am not the one like pulling all the strings. The goddess is like, I've got this from here. And so we go through 6 different cycles together and creating one major intention that you have. And so much happens in your life. It's like your life actually totally reorganizes so that who you are wanting to become is the natural byproduct. Everything that's not in alignment with that will be shown to you in very obvious ways. You will be given so many opportunities to step into this new aspect of yourself. Almost everyone in the current group has said, like, people have been talking about my intention that like I am this, like people are saying that to them. So we're not starting till February 2nd. So this isn't starting for like almost 3 months. However, I wanted to tell you guys about it here because this is naturally connected to the cycle of the underworld and what we're doing here. This is one of the spaces that we're in actually now in the Initiation Mastermind. And I'd like to do different price tiers. So I like to reward people who are like, yep, I'm in. And like those of you who wait till the last minute, cool, that's your process. Totally respect that. Sometimes I do that too. So until November 30th, there's the earliest, I call it extra early bird. So if you're curious about it, let me just see the chat. I put it in here. Rachel, this mastermind is powerful and absolutely life-changing. It's more than you can even fathom. Goddess is incredible. So much shedding, so much growth. The cycles you experience are beautiful. I've never loved the void like I do now, or death for that matter. See, that's the ecstatic death. So you can click on this link. And through November 30th is the end of the extra early bird phase. So we've talked about initiations a little bit, but basically I see this as being a gateway that takes you from one frequency of consciousness into another one. And it totally changes your life. Like you're a different human when you emerge, just like when you leave the underworld. So what this actually includes. Okay, so now we're gonna, hey, it was just 1:44 on my time clock. So perfect. So the darkness is a space where we quietly gestate the next phase of our journey. It is a sacred space of birth. So now we're going to go into the Akashic activation portion of this. So we'll take like a 3-minute break so you guys can go to the bathroom, get some water. If you just need to like stretch, you can get comfortable. So you can turn your video off if you want. You can have it on too. It doesn't matter. You can lay down, you can sit up, whatever you feel called to do so that you won't be distracted. I think that that's the most important part. So we're going to take a little 3-minute break. Actually, what I wanted to say first, if you've never experienced the Akashic Records, this is basically a space where we're receiving guidance from the highest. So if you have a one-on-one session, it's a little different than in a group. When I'm leading these for groups, it's more of a shamanic journey that's channeled. So that's what we're going to be experiencing here today. When you have these sessions one-on-one, which I also do these sessions, it's going into your soul blueprint. It's looking at what are the things coming up for you right now? What are the important choices that you're making? what are the shifts required in your life to what is your soul mission? What is my purpose? Am I supposed to be with my partner? Like all of these different things are so obvious when you look in your records. And so I channel that information. But as a group, because we're not doing that individually, we're going into a deep shamanic journey. Just a reminder, you can get access to the Akashic Records activation that was created specifically for this masterclass on my website. It just doesn't feel appropriate to have it like on the public setting like YouTube because it's really intimate and deep. So you can still get it. You just have to put your email in so it can be emailed to you. That feels more sacred to me. It feels more in alignment for that sort of energetic receiving. So if you want that, just go to my website, alliewilkins.com, and you'll see it there. And I'll have the link in the comments below. And please let me know what you think of it. Please let me know your experience. I would like truly, genuinely love to hear. And also, if you enjoyed this, please make sure to like the video. There's a lot of study and personal experience that went into creating this class. Please leave a comment about what you thought was interesting, what your takeaways were, if you had any aha moments. And please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this sort of content. If you want to learn more about the ancient feminine mysteries, you can also find a lot of masterclasses that I've done on my website. A lot of them I keep free. I never know if I'm going to charge for them. Like sometimes I make things free and then later charge for them as I create more and more and more things. So if you want to get it now, I'm not sure what's going to happen to them long run. But right now I have several masterclasses for free on my website. One is Divinely Funded, learning how to be funded by spirit to really do your work on the planet as a light worker. Another one I have is called Return to Goddess. That is about the shift of matriarchy to patriarchy. I also have a Mary Magdalene ceremony. That one is so beautiful. You'll learn a lot about Mary Magdalene. And there's also like a profound Akashic Records activation for that one. I do Akashic Record activations for all of them, but that one was really, really beautiful. And the one today was really beautiful as well. This Underworld womb of creation experience. So yeah, there's all of that free stuff available for you. So take advantage of it. All right. I hope that you enjoyed this and I will see you in the next one. Bye.